Throughout history, transportation of wounded has been essential to 1. Keep wounded alive, and 2. So they can see their families again. Therefore, the organization of the evacuation process should be organized, beginning all the way to the front. The means of transporting sick and wounded from the evacuation hospitals in the combat zone to another hospital in the communication zone consist of hospital trains, hospital ships, and occasionally motor convoys and airplane ambulances. The usual methods of transporting patients from evacuation hospitals in the combat zone to general hospitals in the communication zones was by means of hospital trains. Hospital trains have been used throughout history. During the Civil War they were used, during the First World War they were used, and yes, during the Second World War too. So today, I will focus on the usage of hospital trains during the Second World War. But first, a bit of background information on the quote, the movement of patients. MedDepartment.com explains, movements of patients being transported to or between medical facilities in the zone of the interior were regulated by the Surgeon General, who had to take into account the medical needs of the patients and bed vaccines in the respective hospitals. The Surgeon General supervised the maintenance of the medical equipment and the staffing of the cars with the medical personnel. Movements from waterports and aeroports, where patients landed after evacuation from overseas theaters, were regulated by the Chief of Transportation, in close collaboration with the Surgeon General. The coordination was provided by the Hospitalization and Evacuation Branch ASF headquarters. The different service commands were responsible for staffing, supplying, and cleaning the cars. They also state hospital trains were in fact true medical department organizations. At the start of 1939, the medical department had 0 trains to their names, and the only vague whispers of how they were going to acquire them during the war. MedDepartment.com states, the U.S. Army would acquire 320 hospital cars for operation in the zone of interior. Of these, 120 were former Pullman sleepers and lounge cars that would be converted into hospital cars with 32 berths arranged in 2 tiers. The remaining 200 will be specifically designed and built as hospital cars with accommodations for 36 patients in 3-tier berths. During January of 1942, a new type of car was developed that could carry more supplies, called a ward dressing car, which had a small dressing room, place for 30 patients, and no kitchen because food came from commercial dining cars. Then on April 1st of the same year, quote, the medical department issued TO 85520, which provided for a self-sustained unit to operate a complete hospital train of max 360 patients. For admin, mess, supply functions, and medical care, each unit was authorized 4 medical officers, 6 nurses, and 33 enlisted men. These men and women were typically assigned to a field hospital unit until the middle of 1943, where they got replaced by separate train units. Air conditioning was also requested for the June of 1942 and later tested in September that same year. But right before it was implemented, a large disagreement about, quote, the type and number of hospital cars, and also the procurement of the same. Finally, a global decision was reached on November 24th, 1942, whereby SOS headquarters directed the Transportation Corps to procure at least 40, and if practical, as many 96 ward cars and ward dressing cars. Contracts signed January 1943. The theaters were dished out for the trains too. The theater operations trains went from a 20-ton train to a 40-ton train, and this change was accepted on the end of 1942. The Army Supply Program wanted to include 40 overseas trains for the years of 1933 to 1944, but the number of trains gathered for here were only 15 in 1943 and 5 in 1944. Meanwhile, 23 trains were acquired. In the UK, though there were some issues, MedDepartment.com states, in view of assumptions that VE Day would occur in June of 1945, it was estimated in December of 1944 that the number of patients returned to the U.S. each month will range from 32,000 to 36,000 and would decrease thereafter. However, since the major portion of patients were arrived at Pacific ports, with greater distance to general hospitals than Atlantic ports, not enough commercial cars of the desired type would be available. Therefore, there was an additional request on December 19, 1944 for 100 new unit cars, approved with a contract signed in January 1945. On January 22nd, 20 troop kitchen cars were ordered from the Defense Plant Corporation and delivered within just a few months of time. In May of 1945, 47,044 patients were moved by hospital train, and the Army had to use 120 old hospital cars, 100 new unit cars, as well as 60 kitchen cars to make it work. Even with 1,200 Pullman cars had to be supplemented too. By late August 1945, the overall number of patients declined rapidly, and the Army declared surplus 36 modified war cars and ward dressing cars. After VJ Day, the further decline in patient loads permitted further disposal of hospital cars, and by mid-1946, the medical department retained only 100 unit cars. Hospital trains were used to move patients to evacuation to general hospitals and from general hospitals to ports. The distribution and usage of the units were controlled by the medical department, along with its personnel, supply, and maintenance of the medical equipment, all under the order of the chief surgeon, except for those assigned for evacuation within the communication zone that operated under the theater control, though the physical trains themselves were operated by the engineer corps. The hospital train normally had capacity of 256 bed patients and usually consisted of 16 ward cars, 1 utility car, 1 officer personnel car, 2 orderly cars, and 1 kitchen, dining, and pharmacy car. Quarters were also given to officers and nurses with showers, and enlisted personnel were also given similar luxuries. The train cars were also fashioned with all the necessities needed. Quote, each of the ward cars was sufficiently equipped with pajamas, sheets, pillows, blankets, compartment trays, bedpans, litters, medicine cabinets, catheters, and a complete ward case containing hemostats, scalpels, and other medical instruments. The pharmacy was supplied with prescription balance, graduates, drugs, and medicine. The trains were stocked with partially British and American products, but they were completely staffed by American personnel, though all trains were organized in Britain. After Operation Neptune, otherwise known as the Normandy landings, the hospital trains were first improvised from German and French rolling stock. Due to the dock delays, the British-built trains came late. David. Quote, the very first hospital train from Britain only reached the continent on August 14th. It was the 43rd hospital train. Thankfully, though, the Transportation Corps had completed the railways in July. Quote, August 4th, 1944, the first locally improvised ambulance train, French freight cars filled with litter brackets, and other improvisations, was put into service between St. Lo and Cherryburg, staffed by the 11th Hospital Train personnel. Quote, this primitive setup brought with it numerous complications. Until the doors were cut through at each end, there was no means of communication between cars. These makeshift doors permitted the doctors and nurses to care for patients throughout the train, instead of limiting their attention to one car. To also show you some numbers, roughly a month after the rain trails were completed, on September 18th, going from Paris to Lisbon, 228 litter cases, ambulatory patients, 64. Chief du Point to Paris, 186 litter cases, 0 ambulatory patients. From Charolles to Paris, 252 litter cases, 64 ambulatory patients. Reims to Paris, 296 litter, 0 ambulatory. Cherry to Paris, 299 litters, 0 ambulatory. Verdun to Paris, 252 litters, 64 ambulatory. Though a shortage persisted, the Army made an attempt to fix it. On November 25th, 1944, 25 trains were in use, and the department needed 70. Quote, the Transportation Corps and the Medical Department considered every possible means to attain an added equipment and to compensate for the shortage by improvising the existing methods of operation. Continuing on, it was determined by that cutting the train turnaround time there would be a greater availability of hospital trains. This was done in one instance by arrangements with Colonel L.B. McCann, G4, for obtaining priorities for hospital trains during the Normandy to Paris. Later, on February 1st of 1945, the French agreed to construct 9 hospital trains. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more, click the videos on the left and the right. If you have any video suggestions or any questions, comment below. Have a great day.